Hello, and welcome to Insightful Conversations with your host, Three Principles practitioner, Del Adey-Jones. Join her each week as she welcomes some of the world's leading Three Principles teachers and practitioners who share how this understanding has dramatically improved the quality of their lives and the lives of those they work with.
I'm very excited to have Julian Fraser with me today. Since coming across the principles in 2006, Julian has experienced several deep insights, resulting in big life changes, both physically and spiritually. He has worked as a Three Principles practitioner for almost 15 years, and he has served as a 3P UK conference director since 2011. He recently co-founded a non-profit to provide well-being support to families living with disabilities. Welcome, Julian. I want to start off, as I usually do. I just want to hear a little bit about your story and how you came across the principles and how they impacted your life.
Okay, so I came across the principles in 2006, 2007, something like that. The organisation that I was working for at the time, the kind of former incarnation of Better World Charity, which organises the 3P UK conference. So we were looking for a kind of a way of helping the students that we were previously working with from a well-being capacity. And a former roommate of Rabbi Rosenblatt, who is the director of the charity, approached him and said, he'd come across this understanding that and he was based in Seattle, and so he was working with George and Linda, the Pratskys, and he was also quite close with Sid Banks, and going to kind of his seminars and talks on Salt Spring Island. And so he approached us and said, "Look, I think you should look at this." So he came and did a presentation for us, and it really ultimately it had a deep impact on me, and my first insights were into my angry behavior, and I at that point I was I could be quite aggressive as a human being, generally across the board, but mainly at work, and that really touched me in those areas, because I recognized that was something I needed to work on, but I tried several times before, using various different approaches. I wasn't really one of the seeker types, but I certainly had tried a few different things out, and I recognized that it was something in me that needed to be worked on, and I just felt a bit helpless. And so, the principles helped me with that, basically. And from there, it's been like a continual learning and growth project. And that's all 15 years ago now. So,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know that you also said that physically it also impacted you. So how did it impact you physically, besides showing up in calming you down and having you not be so angry?
Well, it's quite interesting. So 15 years ago, I was, as well as being quite angry and frustrated, which was my first major shift. So I was also hugely overweight. I was 125, 130 kilos, which is something like, in pounds, I think it's like 250 to 75 pounds, something like that. I'm not 100% sure. I can tell you in stones, it's about 20 stone. Oh, wow. And so, but I know, I don't know, so it's 14 pounds in a stone. So we'll leave that to 280 pounds.
Exactly.
There you go. 280 pounds. There you go. So, and I'm under 6 foot. I'm 5'10". So I'm not. I was very, very large, and I wasn't. Particularly. There wasn't a particular reason for that, other than just I enjoyed eating, and it was something that I'd tried several times before to do something about, just going on a diet and losing weight. And I hadn't had that kind of breakthrough, but it's interesting that the same thing that helped me change from an angry, bear with a sore head, as George used to describe it, to a regular human being, was another insight into my eating habits. So I was, I would regularly help myself to fourth meal of the day, late at night in the kitchen, and I had an insight that I wasn't hungry and I didn't need to eat. I was just following that same routine, following my old thought patterns. And when I realized that I didn't need to eat, I basically chose not to. From that insight, that insightful realization made me realize that I could do something about it at source, as it were. And it's quite interesting because very recently, the lockdown, everyone has, well, not everyone, but many people have put on a few extra pounds here and there. So I also have, spending all this time at home, you get, back into old routines. And I woke up recently and out of nowhere I had this bolt from the blue about why I'd been waking up with the odd headache, on a morning. And I've been trying to kind of put it down to kind of, lots of different things, but I realized that it was born out of my eating and kind of just taking my eye off the ball in that regard. And it was actually quite a powerful experience. That insight, as it were, has helped me shift back onto the right track. Because I remember at the time it came from that same feeling, it came from that same energy, that insight, which was so powerful in terms of me kind of changing. That it's the insight, it's always coming from the insight that helped me kind of just shift back into that this time around.
Yeah.
And so it was really touching.
That's wonderful. And you're right. I mean, I'm definitely one of those people that gained a few pounds at the beginning of this. And it's like you said, I had an insight probably around Christmas, where I saw that I have a habit of sometimes slipping into food being a reward. And it was this sort of my thinking last year in lockdown was, we're suffering. I deserve to give myself a reward. And that reward was an extra £10. But once I saw that, that's just my thinking. I don't need to reward myself with food for this. In fact, this is not exactly suffering for me. I've enjoyed this time at home. And as soon as I saw it, that was it. Just the weight started just falling off again, because it was, catching that habitual thinking, as you say. So I love that. And you know what else I wanted to touch on? I know that you had an awful experience at the birth of your daughter, and which was very challenging for you. And again, that was prior to you coming across the principles. So I'd love to hear how the principles impacted how you dealt with that situation, because I know it was a tragic situation for you and your family.
Yeah.
So talk a bit about how the principles helped with that.
So I'm lucky enough to have a wife and 5 children, and a dog, Henri. And my second child, Hassia. So when she was born, my wife was induced, and there was no real indication that there was any problems or any kind of issues going into hospital that day, other than she was just late, so to speak. So we went in for the induction, and it seemed to proceed quite normally. And in fact, we later found out that it did. It was proceeding as you would expect. And then as we start getting towards later on in the evening, there were a few problems. Primarily, there was a dip in the heart rate of my daughter, and I ran to get a nurse. And the nurse came, the midwife came, and she said, "Oh, it's just shuffled around." She said, "Can you move?" And to my wife, not me obviously, but my wife moved. My wife moved. She moved, and the heart rate monitor kind of seemed to adjust and go back to normal. What we later found out was that the heart rate monitor was from then on monitoring my wife's heart rate and not my daughter Hasia's heart rate, and that Hasia was in distress from that moment basically until she was born about an hour later. And so when she was born, she emerged very purple, not breathing, not moving, and lifeless. I don't know how else to describe it, but so they started resuscitation for her. And I say her, I mean, even the hospital at that point weren't expecting anything because they hadn't noticed that there was a problem. And so that was just that our midwife and I ran out the room and, called the alarm, so to speak. And so she wasn't breathing for about 10 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
And in those 10 minutes, obviously, she's just not breathing. It's not like she's going to start in a few minutes later, so you don't know what's going to happen. And so it was obviously a very traumatic kind of immediate period. And then when she did start breathing, she was very limp and faint and was taken to the intensive care baby unit. And within, I would say 12 hours, they had diagnosed that she had cerebral palsy. She'd suffered brain damage from that lack of oxygen when she was born. And they couldn't tell us what that would emerge or transpire. I don't know what the right word is, but what the prognosis was likely to be, how severe that prognosis was likely to be. And that was an immensely difficult time, because you go into the hospital, for anyone who's had a child, there's a lot of kind of, I would say, unknowing expectation as to what's happening. It's just an incredibly exciting time. You're about to bring a new life into the world, and there are lots of just unconscious expectations as to how that's going to pan out, and when it doesn't happen, and when things turn out very different, so it feels like your life is just turned upside down. And so we left the hospital a couple of weeks later with Hasia. She was, at that point, she looked like any other, 2-week-old child, but we knew that she had struggled, and she was likely to have some, struggles. Now, I can't remember where I heard this, but it was she was expected to have moderate to severe impact in terms of her life, and so my mind then went into overdrive, just to kind of put you in the picture. So this was 17 years ago, almost 18 years ago, actually. In 2 weeks' time, should be 18. Gosh. And so my mind went into just overdrive, thinking about just what the future was likely to be. Is she going to be able to walk? Is she going to be able to talk? Is she going to be able to, have friends, get married, have kids, feed herself, go to school? Just all of those, I guess, life expectation, goal questions that you have as a parent, just seem to have no answer. And so thinking about all of that, I went into, a severe state of upset, now, like, as I said, kind of timeline wise, this was before I came across the principles. And I didn't really know what to do. Now, it goes to show you, just kind of talking about it in the way that we have. So, what we were saying before about the power of insight and in terms of changing, the ability to change your experience. So I hadn't come across the principles at that point. But somewhere along the line, in that first kind of month after we left the hospital, I could see myself. I had enough awareness, or I had some sort of self-awareness that I could see that there were times where I was upset and deeply distressed, and there were other times that I wasn't. And I didn't want to be upset. I realized that I had this kind of, there's moments when I'm upset and there's moments when I'm not upset. And what is it about when I'm upset that's kind of taking me into or creating those feelings? And so I kind of looked at that and I kind of saw that I'm upset when I'm thinking about the future, and I'm not upset when I'm not thinking about the future. So if I could see that it was coming from me. I could see that it was coming from my thinking about the future. And I had some sort of insight or realization that I could not think about it if I chose to. That it was coming from me. It wasn't coming from the circumstances. Because the circumstances were the same whether I was thinking about it or not. But if I didn't think about it, then I'd actually be feeling much better than I was. And so I realized that I didn't have to. And from that, I just decided that I would avoid playing that record kind of over and over again, as much as I could. And lo and behold, no surprise to anyone who's come across this understanding before, my experience, my feelings did change, and I stopped feeling so worried and scared and fearful of the future, and started realizing that I could just get on with being a good parent and helping my daughter and my other child and my wife, and just being present and just being in a better state of mind and being, without worrying about the future. And so I just started doing better.
That's wonderful. And I love what you're pointing to is that, when we come across the principles, we're not learning something new. We're sort of discovering what's been going on all the time anyway. It's just a way to describe our human experience. And, and I love what you're saying. It's like you saw for yourself that when you were up in your personal thinking about a future, or maybe even regret on the past, the sort of you got really, really caught up. But when you just settle down and were in the present moment, just showing up, as you said, as being the best dad you could, dealing with whatever needed to be taken care of in that moment without adding the added stress of thinking about the future, you were able to be a wonderful father. So I love, obviously, this experience has helped you to because I know right now you're working on a project with Claire Schutz, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that. I know it's not fully formed yet, but we can put a teaser out there. So so tell our listeners what that is about.
So Claire and I have known each other for over 10 years. And Claire she has cerebral palsy herself. So I, as a parent, and Claire as someone who has a disability, we decided to come together to reach out and help parents and family members of children or spouses, other people who have a disability in their family, because as I experienced, as I just described, as well as kind of the parents and other family members that I've come across, kind of dealing with that situation and kind of coming from a healthy place is very difficult. Parents I've spoken to and heard stories from, who've had children like my daughter Asia, or similar or very different circumstances. It's very common for them to feel cheated, for them to feel scared, for them to feel just totally isolated and alone, not able to cope with the stress of dealing with that set of circumstances. Without that insight, and had I, at that point, it was just kind of the insight that I had was related to my daughter and that circumstance. It wasn't a broadened understanding of the principles and how that works. But what we've come to see is that is obviously it's a universal understanding of how the mind works, and that Claire and I feel we're in a unique position to share that with people. And I've come across, really heartbreaking stories of parents who just feel totally just unable to cope. And so we wanted to do something to help, family members of people with disabilities, and touch them and help them to, as you say, live in the present and not get caught up in their thinking in terms of being fearful and anxious and stressed about all the things that they feel they have to kind of deal with. And so that's called the Almondry. It's a non-profit organization, and as you say, it's kind of it's getting set up at the moment.
Wonderful. I mean, as I'm listening to you, as a mother myself, I can't help but feel, I know that it's challenging even for me, and my children are sort of able-bodied, to sort of not worry about them or go into the future and start thinking how they're going to, deal with life or whatever. So I can't even begin to imagine the stress and the added impact of having a child that has disabilities, or as you say, a spouse. So I think it's a wonderful, wonderful organization that you're creating here with Claire. So when will it be up and running, and and how can people find access to it?
We are almost getting there. We hope in about 6 weeks, so the beginning of May, we should be up and running. And the web address is thealmondtree.org, O-R-G. So thealmondtree.org.
Beautiful.
That's our web address. There is a website there, but we're programs and our videos. We've got testimonials. We're recording testimonials of parents and other people who use the principles, both in a setting with a similar setting to the one we're talking about with disabled children or family members, as well as just other practitioners as well. So.
Gosh, sounds great. Well, in the meantime, I know you're also doing your other job, which you've been doing since 2011, and putting on the 3P UK conference. So tell us a little bit about that. This year, unfortunately, again, due to COVID, we're not going to be meeting in person in London, which is such an amazing event. Looking forward to it next year in person, I hope. But tell us a little bit about that and how that came about, and how people can sign up for that too.
Yeah. So as you say, the conference has been going for 10, 11 years now. It started out in the Better World Centre, as it were, which was a kind of smallish kind of community centre in northwest London. We had, I think, 120, 30 people come for 3 days. And it's grown from that over the years to where it is in non-COVID times, in physical, in person. It's in a big kind of sports stadium event facility, and we get I think in 2019, which was our last physical event, we had 1,100 people from all over the world, which amazes me immensely, that people from east and west coast of the US and further just come to spend 3 days immersed in the principles.
It's also the best party.
Yeah.
It's such an incredible feeling. I remember, I think in 2019, I was thinking to myself, how can you gather this many happy, upbeat, chilled out people together for the whole course of, those 3 days? It's incredible.
It is amazing. And so, look, we can't do it in person. COVID restrictions still prevent us from doing that. So like last year, we're going to be doing an online conference. And last year we had 1,300 people signed up. I'm not sure if we're going to get to those numbers, but we invite everyone to sign up still. The web address is the3pconference.live. So the.3pconference.live. And you can buy tickets there. It's a 3-day conference. All the recordings are going to be available afterwards. So the time zone, whilst we try and have pushed it back to make it more accessible for people in the US. So we start, I think, around 12:30 p.m. GMT. So we did have people from the West Coast joining live last year. I think they came in. I was one of them. Right, exactly. So, but all the recordings are going to be available, so you don't miss anything really. And we go from 12:30 p.m. GMT until 8 o'clock in the evening GMT. So that's kind of midday. So you'll get up early, and you'll still have you have your lunch, and then you'll be ready to start the day feeling great. So. And as usual, we're bringing a real varied mix of our, let's say, I don't want to say more experienced speakers, but people who have been around longer than me in the principles, who knew Sid Banks personally, as well as a lot of new speakers from all over the world. We've actually got we've got a couple of sessions from people actually from. The theme is that it's going to be a conversation, a global conversation. So we've got people coming from, all over the world, so to speak, different speakers who are just going to be talking about the experience that they have of both the principles and in their own native countries, kind of coming together.
That's wonderful. I know I was very privileged to be one of your new speakers last year. So it was a great experience. And I when you're talking right now, I keep thinking about that map that Shaul and Aaron just point to. And I think there were like 52 countries last time I was on, just incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
The reach around the globe that the Three Principles has now. I remember Dick and Betton just saying, I think the first conference was held in a phone box. There were about 6 people in it. And now it's, thousands. So it's wonderful. So just say the dates again. So people, are you?
Oh, yeah, very good. Thank you. The dates are the 25th to the 27th of April. 2021, and so that's Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And we have a 3-day ticket, so you can get all 3 days, or a 1-day ticket if you only want to come for 1 day. But we obviously recommend that you come for all 3 days. The best value is a 3-day ticket. If you are new to the 3P UK conference, I would suggest that you sign up to our mailing list, or actually I can read out a conference code now. I'd be happy to share the 3P UK conference code. It's 3P UK 10 for a 10% discount if you are considering purchasing a ticket.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited. I already have my ticket, of course. And just name a couple of some of the key speakers that you're going to be having.
So we have Elsie, sorry, not Elsie. I shouldn't have said Elsie. I should have said Chip and Jan Chipman. We have Mara Olson speaking. We have George and Linda Pransky speaking. We have Joe Bailey speaking. We have Michael Neal speaking. We have Nicola Bird speaking. We have, I'm just trying to think now. I should have had my list here. But I would say go to the website, the.3pconference.live website, and you'll see there are lots and lots of well-known speakers from the 3P world, as well as lots of other new faces as well. And it's a very varied program. We've got something for everyone, really something for everyone. And the variety of the program, the way it's going to work this year is we've got in the main, as well as breakouts where we've got 10 different choices, we also have kind of tracks. There are like 4 different tracks running for most of the conference. So there's lots of different options on lots of different perspectives. And so I'm going to be doing a session with Linda Pransky and Claire about looking beyond the physical diagnosis, based on what we were talking about before. So Linda's experience with George Pransky, who is recovering from a stroke. So she's going to be sharing in that session as well.
Wonderful. Oh, it sounds so exciting. I love it. And what's so beautiful is there are all of these options to join into live, but as you say, that you don't miss out on anything because everything's recorded. So in your own time, you get to catch up on everything. Well, I'm so grateful for you coming on today. I know how busy you are, especially getting ready for the conference. And again, I'm really looking forward to checking out the nonprofit program that you are putting together. I know it sounds very exciting, and I know how much help it's going to bring to so many families that are suffering and feeling alone under the circumstances of dealing with illness. And so again, thank you so much. It's been wonderful speaking with you again.
Thank you, Del. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Okay, well, enjoy the rest of your day in the UK, and I'll speak to you soon.
I will.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you're interested in learning more about my coaching and mentoring packages, please reach out to me at deladeyjones@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you.